Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me. And I'm back. With part 3 of What If Deku had a half fire, half lightning quirk. Glad to see y'all are enjoying it. I don't really got that much to say, but I appreciate all the support that y'all give me. I wanted to preference that I do have a membership, so if y'all want to see these videos early, sometimes it's like a day early, sometimes it's like 3 to 4 hours early. It really depends. But of course, it's kind of difficult when I try to upload at least or close to every single day and trying to get those videos out early for you guys. Sometimes it's only going to be a day, or sometimes it's only going to be a couple hours early. But nonetheless, it's not that expensive, and it shows support for me. You get little emotes and stuff like that. So nonetheless, I think it's pretty cool if you want to support me via that. But if not, hey, all good. I appreciate the support nonetheless, you just sticking around watching the videos. So with that said, though, I'm going to not waste that much more of your time, and we're going to get into part 3 of What If Deku had a half fire, half lightning quirk, and let's get into it. The USJ has been invaded. Villains all around, and Izuku is in complete shock. What is supposed to happen? What are they going to do? He watches as Aizawa steps up and fights a horde of villains. It's truly terrifying. Truly. Yes, he's gone against this so-called sludge villain before. He's gone against some sort of, or villains of that regard. But this is so much different. So much different. And the only reason why is because the intent. He can feel it. He can feel that these villains are here for a reason. Villains are here for a greater purpose. As he's debating and as he's thinking about these things, a portal would open up in front of all of them. Of course, Pro Hero 13 would be right there to protect them, but Bakugo and Kirishima would jump forward to try and fight this so-called warp portal or warp gate villain by the name of Kurogiri. But it would not go very well, leading to all of them getting transported away, and Izuku Midoriya would be sent to the worst place they could possibly send him, or at least in theory. He gets doused in water and thrown into what looks like a big lake, and he sees there's a boat nearby. He looks around, and eventually he would be attacked by not small monsters, but monsters that are basically like fish. But these are actually villains. Villains that are built like piranhas and fish and also scary water creatures. But luckily, Tsuyu is able to pull him out of the water. But she's happy to see him, and Mineta, that is also there as well on the boat, is confused why. Izuku says that it's because this is the best case scenario. This right here is over. And Mineta asks once again why that's the case, and Tsuyu smacks him on the head slightly, saying that he has lightning in one of his quirks. Half of his body can produce electricity. And Izuku smirks and lifts up his left hand as it electrocutes the water beneath them, basically knocking out and injuring severely all of the villains below. He then tells Tsuyu to jump as far as possible while carrying them, and he'll push them further throughout the air using his quirks as well. As they do this, they're able to sustain kind of flight in a way over a good little distance, so they don't actually touch the water, and then they arrive on mainland once again. The goal here is to more or less get back to their class, at least to help as much as possible with whatever is going on. But quickly, Izuku would see that Aizawa is still fighting all of these villains. But luckily, he's having a pretty easy time doing so. So he tells Tsuyu and Mineta that they should head up to the rest of his class, or rest of their class. They begin to head up the staircase, but just as Izuku is, it seems that Aizawa is about to run into far greater trouble than before. That's because Shigaraki has now entered the fight, and that's with also the Nomu. The Nomu, a giant monster that is genetically made up of multiple quirks, and sustainability with those quirks is insane. But at the same time, it's a brainless monster, a monster that is fully controlled by Shigaraki himself. Izuku sees this and immediately bolts off to help out as much as possible. More specifically, help out Aizawa, because he's going to need help with a monster that monstrous, a monster that bad. So immediately he would dive in to protect Aizawa, or at least help him out, blasting by, grabbing him and pulling him out of harm's way. But it's not that simple. Of course, Shigaraki and Kurogiri are right there, so they are able to assist the Nomu in some sort of way, and Shigaraki would tell the Nomu to kill Aizawa and that dumbass kid. Of course, Izuku would stand in front of Aizawa, but Aizawa would tell him this isn't a good idea. He shouldn't be fighting here. But Izuku says that he can hold off the Nomu. He can feel it. He's been training for so long with these quirks. He knows he can. He immediately starts sending lightning toward the Nomu, and this would restrict the Nomu's movement a far bit, actually restricting his mobility entirely. His slow walk toward Aizawa would become even slower, and when Shigaraki tells him to go quicker, the Nomu would begin struggling his way forward, actually hurting himself quite a bit. Yes, he does have shock absorption and so on, but this is far different than that shock absorption. But when he moves forward more, Izuku would begin to use his fire side, as using both concurrently, he hasn't done really ever, but when he does it, it begins to strain his body tremendously. The right side of his body begins to kind of crack, begins to overheat, and he begins to feel the effects of it. But just as he feels that his skin is going to peel, crack itself off as if it's becoming this molten like skin, as if his arm is about to fall off, it feels, he just thinks to himself that he needs to push himself further, because if he doesn't, Aizawa could die, everyone around him could die, everyone around him could get seriously hurt. He wants to protect everyone. He wants to be a true hero. He pushes himself further, but out of nowhere, his skin would feel better, as if he's cooling down, but he's still using his fire. He doesn't understand. Maybe he's figured it out somehow on accident, but that's not the case. Shoto Todoroki is right there. He begins to use his ice near Izuku, cooling off one side of Izuku and also just helping regulate his temperature entirely. This would help tremendously. It would allow Izuku to stay maintained, and Izuku would look over towards Shoto as he would nod his head as if it's some sign of respect. Shoto may not be ready to use his fire side, not himself, but he will help Izuku utilize that fire side, because that fire side is not his father's. That fire side is something that he was born with, and that's something he is utilizing to its fullest capacity. The Nomu is stuck in place and is slowly but surely degrading from the combination of the lightning and the combination of the fire. Degrading slowly. As it softens up its skin, it begins to peel off and slowly but surely degrade the quirks that are within the Nomu. Izuku didn't know that this would happen, but it's something that he's happy that it is, because it seems that he's able to at least help out with getting everyone away from the Nomu and securing the idea that Aizawa and many others are completely safe. But there is no beating this Nomu. He wasn't going to defeat it, because Shoto Todoroki may have been able to help, but this was not going to finish the job, because eventually Izuku would collapse to the ground and only be able to look up at the Nomu regenerating. But it seems that the regeneration is slow, weakened, and everything about that Nomu is weakened. So when a giant noise and a giant thud is heard, and a giant man comes out and says, "I am here," Izuku smiles, because All Might has arrived. One giant punch to the Nomu, and a Nomu is out of commission entirely, sent flying outside of the USJ. All Might then looks towards Shigaraki and Kurogiri, telling them that this is how it's going to end. Them in prison. All Might is about to charge forward, but portals open and Shigaraki and Kurogiri escape with no trace at all. Izuku looks up at All Might once again, and, well, he sighs in relief as he passes out entirely, and he's gonna be asleep for a little bit. But when Izuku would wake up, he would wake up in Recovery Girls right next to his mother, who's been concerned the entire time. Izuku knew that there were repercussions to using his quirk the way he did. It was kind of like a all-out trump card in a way, and something he's never really prepared for, at least not to that extreme limit. But still, he was able to protect those around him, and he was able to be the hero he knows he should be and could be. But with that information said and that information done, he's told relatively quickly that he's extremely limited in power, that he can't really use his quirk, and that's going to be a bit of an issue because the UA Sports Festival is coming up very, very soon, actually in the next day or so. He asks what is he supposed to do, and they say that he can be in the UA Sports Festival, but the issue is he won't really be able to use his quirk. And he's kind of shocked to hear this, but he feels that the UA Sports Festival is a great opportunity, so he can't just let it go. He goes back to class, and he's going to take on the UA Sports Festival with limited quirk usage, if not mostly completely none. Now this is where things get extremely difficult. We're talking about a event that is built to show off your skills with your quirk. He's not going to utilize a quirk, at least try not to utilize it for the mass majority of the time, because he is told that he can use it, quote unquote, but not to the point that he'll be okay if he uses it or overuses it to a certain point. So that's what he does. When the UA Sports Festival arrives, he, of course, is that #1 student, so he would have a speech to talk about. He would talk about basically that they're going to give it all they have, and that's all. He doesn't even bring up the fact that he can't really use his quirks. And funny enough, many of the students and many people in general are extremely surprised. Why not bring that up? It'd be kind of like your scapegoat. Now nobody's going to judge you, but many may judge you because you're not utilizing your quirk. But Izuku doesn't want to make excuses. He doesn't want to make or have a scapegoat, because what happens in the line of work when he's hurt, when he's injured, and he's forced to push himself further? There's no reason to make excuses, and that's the last thing he'll do. He's not going to make any excuses. Izuku would get ready for the first event, in which Midnight says that it is an obstacle course race. Let's just say there's going to be a bit of struggle involved. But still, he has a mind for things just like this. He would progress in the obstacle course race, passing through the corridors and also passing through the robots. But he would be kind of in the back with the other people that kind of are struggling. But eventually leading to Izuku crossing over this giant canyon and eventually making it to the minefield. The minefield is exactly where Izuku's going to thrive, and exactly where his brain is going to really allow him to think. Izuku comes up with the same idea of digging up the mines and creating a giant explosion that would send him forward. So he does just that. He makes a giant explosion that would send him flying forward, and he's able to somewhat gain speed and gather himself entirely. But the only issue with this is Izuku may be restricted in his quirk, but he's also restricted in his body. He was extremely injured, or at least his use of his quirk made him extremely injured. So when he recovers, he still isn't able to get first place. He's able to get about 3rd or 4th behind someone like Bakugo and Todoroki. But even Todoroki has a mutual respect for Izuku, especially after what he just did. He even says that Izuku was real impressive right there, especially not being able to use his quirks. Izuku nods and says that he's going to give it as much as he can, and give as much as he has throughout this time. But the restriction with his body and the restriction of his quirk, well, it's kind of difficult to really do anything. The cavalry battle may actually allow him to end up on top, and there's an argument made that he could probably have an even better team than what he had initially, but let's just say that it's him, Ochaku Uraraka, Mei Hatsume, and Tokiyami. Yes, they would make it out of the round, but in terms of the 1v1s, he would fall short to Shinso. And many would question why he didn't use his quirk. Many would question if he just took a dive, in which it may seem that way. And to Izuku, he kind of would want to have taken that dive anyways, because Shinso was in an unfortunate spot. Like he said, Izuku was or is really gifted. He has a quirk that is absolutely insane, and Shinso has, well, this brainwash quirk, one that makes him seem like a villain. Izuku doesn't really mind losing to someone like that, someone that would benefit from the win against the number one, well, student in UA, quote unquote, or in class Wade. So Izuku would be forced to watch from the sideline. Shinso would fall relatively quickly after, but he already got the benefits from beating Izuku, and as Izuku continues to watch, eventually it would lead to the finale. That finale would be Katsuki Bakugo versus Shoto Todoroki. And this fight right here would be one for the ages. Bakugo would come out hot, charging forward to try and clash as much as possible, trying to more or less put Todoroki on the back foot. His utilization of ice, though, would definitely keep him in it, but once that ice begins to crystallize on his body, and once his body begins to slow down, his whole thing begins to crumble. But there's something different about Todoroki this time around, and Izuku even stands up and smiles. He tells everyone there that the game and this fight is over. Izuku would put his hands in his pockets and would be in complete awe, would be staring right at them, in which everyone thinks that he means that Bakugo has won. But just as they all think this, fire would erupt from the middle of the stage. Fire would consume the area, and the ice around his body would begin to fade, would begin to melt. Shoto Todoroki has broken the wall, and through the interaction with Izuku, through that interaction, he's now using his fire side. Todoroki would eliminate Bakugo, knocking him off the stage, and Todoroki would look toward his father. He would basically scowl or growl, more or less, being angry, of course, but then he would look toward his class, seeing Izuku, and Izuku has a smirk on his face. Todoroki nods as if it's an acknowledgement of the fact that Izuku has put him over that edge, has made him realize that the utilization of his quirk is his own, and Todoroki has now shown the world that he's number one, or at least number one in the UA Sports Festival. All the medals are given out, and there is no Bakugo to get all mad and huffy. Of course, he's frustrated he lost, but at the same time, he lost to somebody using all of his power. Todoroki is happy with this, so is Bakugo to an extent, but he won't admit that. And Izuku is happy to see the success that came out of this, even when he wasn't necessarily the prime example of it. Izuku the next day would arrive to see that he actually doesn't really have that many offers. It kind of backfired on him. Maybe he should have just taken the UA Sports Festival off, but he showed and proved to himself how far he could get even without his quirk. Luckily, his recovery is coming to a close, and he's going to feel pretty good coming up here, so wherever he does go, he'll definitely benefit. But when Izuku would look through what choices he has and where he's allowed to go and where he can go, he would eventually see one person that stuck out more than everybody combined. Endeavor. Why would Endeavor? And then he looks over to Todoroki, and Todoroki looks at him and nods. Todoroki himself actually sent this offer. Endeavor has no idea, but he'll tell him now. Todoroki begins to text his father, telling him exactly what happened, and his father's not too happy about this. But Todoroki says that, I mean, he did mistakenly offer, he can't backtrack on it now. In which Endeavor gets frustrated because he knows Todoroki sent that acceptance and Todoroki sent that offer. Todoroki gets a small bit of revenge in a way, but he's also now able to work with Izuku, someone that has a fire side and someone that does, or that has a half and half quirk just like him. So they'll be able to have extremely fruitful training, and he'll be able to at least ignore his father to a certain extent, so he doesn't have to deal with, you know, all of that. With that said though, Izuku Midoriya is going to basically work and train under the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Now with that said, how will this all go? What will happen? And how will this training exactly help Izuku and help Todoroki? Well, you'll have to find out in part 4 of What If Deku had a half fire, half lightning quirk. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, make sure to leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope y'all have an amazing day. Later.